Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson, and I am your host. This is episode 55 of the FFP podcast. It is currently Saturday, December 13th at around 3:30 p.m. that I'm starting recording this episode. So we're going to get into the Week 15 preview. I got you with my fire starts of the week that never miss. We're going to recap that crazy Thursday night football game with one of the greatest fantasy performances in the history of fantasy football. And then breaking news, just as of like right before I sat down to record, some important news came through about Christian McCaffrey. So, you know, the fantasy playoffs are here. If you have Christian McCaffrey, there's a very good chance you're in the playoffs, unless the rest of your team was just terrible or had, you know, a lot of bad injuries. And yeah, we're going to get right into it. But before we do that, please make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are enjoying the podcast. And if you want video of the pod, you want to see my friend Cooper in the background as he's grooming himself at the moment, head over to YouTube, Fantasy Football Prodigy. You can see my ugly mug and Cooper's cute mug. So anyways, let's start with kind of the biggest piece of news here, I guess. The 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey was added to the injury report and is questionable for Sunday's game against the Titans with a back injury. Now, usually when you get added to the injury report late in the week, like as late as Saturday, that usually doesn't bode well for your health and for your chances to play, especially for a player like McCaffrey who has dealt with injuries and, you know, season-ending injuries. I know it's late in the year, but if he missed the rest of the season, it would be season-ending. He's dealt with, you know, injuries like that throughout his career. Adam Schefter also tweeted, though, that despite being added to the injury report, he's expected to be good to go. Now, in the past, we've seen, you know, the reports on Christian McCaffrey straight up lie. Like last year, it seemed like he was going to be fine, and then what happened? He missed the whole year. So it's something to monitor. You know, I'm recording this sort of as this news is breaking. So, you know, after I post this, up until, you know, Sunday when their game starts, you need to monitor the news. If Brian Robinson, the handcuffed backup running back there, is available, make sure he is on your team. If he is a free agent, there's a good chance that he's already rostered. But, you know, speaking of 49ers, Brandon Ayuk, he will not be returning this season. It looks like 49ers wide receiver. He's on the reserve left squad list, making him ineligible to return this season and raises questions about where he will be next year. So yeah, a lot of good news for 49ers fans. Anyways, let's get into my starts of the week. We'll do a quick recap of the Thursday night game, and then we will preview the rest of the week 15 games here. So I'm going to go position by position and give you my start of the week for each of them, whether it's a player who, you know, I think can outperform their, you know, consensus ranking, or someone who has upside, someone who's in a good matchup, elevated role, yada, yada, yada. So quarterback start of the week, Matthew Stafford of the Los Angeles Rams at home against the Detroit Lions. And that one is at home, right? Yep. At home against the Detroit Lions. Okay. He was my start of the week last week, and he was the quarterback 4 overall on the week. Stafford has had an incredible season, and now he gets a revenge game against his former team. The Lions are tough to run on, but have been a great matchup for the passing game all season. They have given up the second most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks, and the most in the entire league over the last 3 weeks. This game has an insane 55.5 point over-under, so we could see a shootout. Stafford is going to need to air it out to Puka and Devontae here, and I know he wants to put up a good game against his former team. I like Matthew Stafford as a high quarterback 1 in week 15. And let me just verify that that line is still correct, 55.5. It's at 54.5 now, actually. So I'm going to say this again just for the clip, because I'm going to edit this into a clip after, but you get a little behind the scenes here. This game has an insane 54.5 point over-under, so we could see a shootout. Okay, there. Anyways, so you know, when I post a clip to, you know, TikTok and all that, it'll actually be, you know, accurate. But it was at 55.5. Looks like it's 54.5 now, but it should be a high-scoring game. Moving on to the running back position, Running back start of the week, Woody Marks of the Houston Texans at home against the Arizona Cardinals. Woody has taken over the Texans' backfield over Nick Chubb. As of this recording, Chubb is questionable with a rib injury. I love Woody Marks this week, regardless of if Chubb plays or not. But if Nick Chubb is out, that just adds even more security to Woody's load. Woody has seen 17 or more opportunities in 5 straight weeks, and last week he had a whopping 26 carries to go along with 3 targets. Now he gets to take on a Cardinals defense that has allowed the most schedule-adjusted fantasy points above expectation to running backs over the last 5 weeks. At home, in a good matchup that the Texans should be leading in, with potential for a huge workload, I like Woody Marks as a high running back 2 in Week 15. Moving on to the wide receiver position here. Wide receiver start of the week, Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions on the road against the Los Angeles Rams. The Lions had their bye in Week 8. Since Week 9, Jameson is the wide receiver 4 overall and the wide receiver 7 in points per game. Those marks include a 0-point performance in Week 12, so that shows just how good he's been in that span outside of that one disappointing game. This game between the Rams and the Lions has the highest over-under of the week at 54.5, so I want pieces of this game. Puka, Devontae, and Amon-Ra are auto starts, but this is the type of game where I would try to get Jameson and his big play ability in my lineup. I like Jameson Williams as a high upside, low wide receiver 1 in Week 15. And I'm going to make sure that that's still the highest over-under of the week. Yeah, because Ravens Bengals is still, that's at 51.5. Then yeah, Lions Rams is the highest. Moving on. Final start of the week. Tight end start of the week, Harold Fannin Jr. of the Cleveland Browns on the road against the Chicago Bears. Fannin has flashed as a rookie, and he has, excuse me. I heard Cooper moving around back there, and I was worried. He's just chilling. So let me start over. Tight end start of the week, Harold Fannin Jr. of the Cleveland Browns on the road against the Chicago Bears. Fannin has flashed as a rookie, and he had a huge game last week, putting up 8 receptions for 114 yards and 1 touchdown on 11 targets. He has been sharing the tight end workload with David Njoku all season, but Njoku has been ruled out this week against the Bears, so that gives me a little more confidence to start Fannin. This game is expected to be extremely cold, but as long as the wind stays in check and Shadur Sanders continues to play competent ball at quarterback, I'm happy starting Fannin, who has a chance to be the highest targeted player on his offense. He's no Kyle Pitts, but I like Harold Fannin as a mid tight end 1 in Week 15. Those are my starts of the week. Hopefully they all do well. And they should, and they shall. If they don't, you know what? Oh well. At least we did our best. Speaking of players doing well, the Thursday night game between the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Falcons in Tampa was crazy. The Falcons had a nice fourth quarter comeback to get the win, 29-28. This game, the big story here is Kyle Pitts at tight end. You know, he was in consensus to be like a start of the week for me if I recorded this before Thursday. But I didn't think he had this type of ceiling, but he went 11 for 166 and 3 touchdowns on 12 targets. There's all sorts of crazy stats. Like I heard it's like 7% of his career, like stats, like fantasy points all time in his whole career. It's like the only tight end to put up like 150 and 3 in like a super long time, or he might be the only one since like fantasy football has like been a thing. There's all sorts of crazy stats you can find on it, but if you went against him, I apologize. If you have him, congratulations. I know a lot of people probably had him on the bench, which is tough, but you know, there are players I would have played over him, even though I thought he was a decent start. I'm in a playoff where it's actually a 2-week playoff. I don't normally do that, but I joined a league this year where it's a 2-team playoff. I'm the 4 seed against the 1 seed, and I actually had like an 8-9 point lead coming into this week after, you know, last week, and my opponent started Kyle Pitts. So that lead has been more than erased, and I'm now expected to lose pending a miracle. The little ESPN like prediction thing has me at like 30 something percent, like 35, 36, something like that. So yeah, very annoying. And Kyle Pitts is a guy that, I had high hopes for. Once upon a time, I traded George Kittle and a first round pick for him. Like, I think going into like his second year or something after he had his 1,000-yard season. I want to say that's when I did it. It was something pretty early in his career, and he's been, fine at times, but disappointing most of the time. And I did eventually get, George Kittle back in a trade with that same team just because Kyle Pitts wasn't cutting it as my starter. So, I have a bye week in that league. So he is on my bench. It didn't really matter because I don't have an opponent. But yeah, next week, like I got Kittle, I got Pitts. I have a ton of injuries. I'm going to be tempted to flex Kyle Pitts maybe. So it's, it's a thing. And who do they play next week? Kyle Pitts and the Falcons. He's also, let's see. So he plays the Arizona Cardinals next week. I'm not really scared of that matchup at all. Yeah. So other than that, Kirk Cousins, he's not the same quarterback he once was, but he put up 373 and 3. I think I had him in like a DraftKings lineup or something, but you're probably not starting him outside of like a desperate 2-quarterback league situation. Bijan had a great game, looked awesome, 19 for 93 and a touchdown on the ground, 8 for 82 through the air on a whopping 11 targets. Drake London was out for this game, which kind of elevated Kyle Pitts. So next week, if London is back, that does negatively impact Kyle Pitts. But yeah, Tyler Algier, the backup running back, wasn't super involved. Only 2 for 18 on the ground, no targets, no receptions. Davis Sills was the second leading receiver, 6 for 78 on 10 targets. I believe it was him that had a pretty bad drop that could have been a touchdown, like a long touchdown. Darnell Mooney trailed him even in targets. 6 targets, was 3 for 35. So, yeah, Mooney isn't. You would think with London out, Mooney would be like a streaming option, but it just hasn't really been working out. He had a touchdown like a few weeks ago, I think, but other than that, it's been kind of rough. And then for the Bucks, Baker Mayfield was fine for fantasy, 277, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick late in the game that really, I know it's easy to say from watching on a TV, but it's like you can't really turn the ball over where he did in the fourth quarter with that lead. Obviously, he thought it was a throw he could make, and the guy picked it off. So, unfortunate, but he did all right for fantasy. Mike Evans came back in this game after missing a ton of time with injury, and he looked awesome. Like he's on my dynasty team as well, and boy, do we need him with all these injuries that I have. I didn't have him in my lineup. If I was playing someone, it's possible I might have actually put him in, but I was like, you know what? Let's give him another fantasy week off to get healthy on my bench. So, on a bye week didn't matter, but he was 6 for 132 on 12 targets. He was just beating up some of these defensive backs for the Falcons that couldn't keep up with him. Too small, too slow. He looked great. Emeka Egbuka, 4 for 64 on 7 targets. Continued, to be kind of lukewarm. McMillan was back. He had 2 for 38 on 2 targets. Makes sense because I bet him in some parlays on -1.5 receptions. So it makes sense that he had 2 right away. And Godwin was pretty invisible, 5 targets, 4 for 20, but he did catch a touchdown. And then K. Dotton was out for this game at tight end. So Devin Culp, 1 for 6 and a touchdown. I ended up playing their other tight end. I don't even know who, I can't remember his name. In a DraftKings lineup, he was like $600 in a showdown thing, which is super cheap for those who don't follow DFS and DraftKings. But what was his name? I don't think he had a catch. It was Payne Durham. He didn't do anything. So Tez Johnson only 1 target. So he's going to be kind of irrelevant now that all these receivers are healthy. And kind of the big news here, in a guillotine league, I have an absolutely stacked team. And I was deciding between guys like James Cook, Devontae Adams, Bucky Irving, George Pickens. So I already had Puka in my lineup and Josh Allen as my quarterback. So because of that, I opted to go with Bucky Irving and not have 2 Rams and 2 Bills. And I thought Bucky Irving would be like a really safe, solid play on Thursday Night Football. He was 16 for 16 on the ground. 1 for 11 through the air on 3 targets. He looked good early, but he didn't really do much as the game went on, and a lot of the goal line opportunities went to Sean Tucker. He had 4 carries for 7 yards and a touchdown, Sean Tucker did. I want to say all 4 of those were at the goal line. At least 3 of them were, and I don't think Bucky Irving was ever really in there, so that is something to monitor moving forward. And of course, the lowest scoring team in the Guillotine League, like projection wise, had Kyle Pitts. So now they're projected to make it. There's like 4 teams left, and I'm at the bottom because of that bad call on my part. And then the team that was supposed to get chopped playing Kyle Pitts and more than likely being safe already just because of that one performance. So, yeah, the Buccaneers are kind of falling apart here, and the Carolina Panthers are now leading the division, and if they beat the Saints, they'll be, you know, winning the division even more and in control of their destiny with 2 more games against the Buccaneers. So that's going to do it for the Thursday Night Football recap. Let's move on to previewing the rest of the Week 15 games. All right, we'll start with the Los Angeles Chargers at 9-4, traveling to Arrowhead to take on the Chiefs at 6-7, which is crazy to say, but the Chiefs really needed a win last week to keep their playoff hopes alive, and they did not get the dub. So it's looking like the Chiefs have a really good chance of missing the playoffs here. Like they are very much up against it. This game has a 41.5 point over under. The Chiefs are favored by 6. It's not projected to be a high scoring game. It's going to be cold out, 17 degrees, not a lot of wind. So I'm not super concerned about that. But Patrick Mahomes this week, probably more of a low end quarterback one versus you know, some I mean, he's Mahomes, so he can always have a good week, but in a game like this that's projected to be low scoring against a Chargers defense that's given up the second fewest points overall to quarterbacks on the season, you know, I'd rather play Jackson Dart over Mahomes. Him versus Trevor Lawrence is an interesting call. I'd probably go Mahomes still, but it's close. And then Kareem Hunt is pretty much just a touchdown or bust type of guy. Pacheco, Brashard Smith, I'm not interested, but Kareem Hunt, you can throw him in as a touchdown dependent running back 3. And then the only receiver I'm really playing here is Rashee Rice. I'm not interested in Xavier Worthy, but Rice is a must start. And then Travis Kelce, I am cool rolling him out there. I have him and Brock Bowers in my Guillotine League. And, you know, Bowers has a tough matchup in Philadelphia against that defense. I don't know if the offense is going to be able to move the ball. Travis Kelce, I don't know if he has the same ceiling as Bowers, but he's been pretty consistent all season. Last week was rough, but that was the Houston Texans who they shut down everybody. Kelce was 1 for 8 on 5 targets. I think he's going to have a better game than that. The Chargers are a good defense. They've given up the 8th fewest points to tight ends on the year, but still, I think the way they use him, it's also 8th schedule adjusted against the position as well. So he's kind of a mid tight end 1, low to mid tight end 1. And that's pretty much it for the Chiefs side of the ball. On the Chargers side of things, Justin Herbert, you can start him. It's not the best matchup and game environment for Justin Herbert. He's good enough where, you know, you can start him, but I'm honestly probably trying to look elsewhere just because, you know, the Chiefs are the 9th toughest matchup against quarterbacks on the season when you factor in schedule. And Herbert, he's been good most of the year, but he's had his games where he's disappeared. The last 4 weeks, not including their bye week, he's been pretty bad for fantasy. So I would be looking elsewhere at quarterback, unless you're in like a 2 quarterback league or you're in a league where people hoard QBs, and maybe you have to start him, but you can probably do better. Like I would start Lawrence over him, Mahomes on the other side, Jackson Dart, Brock Purdy, Darnold, Mariota, that kind of tier. I would start over Herbert. And then Omarion Hampton, it's a tough matchup, but he came back last week and looked pretty good. So I'm cool to start Omarion Hampton. He saw 13 carries, went for 56 yards on the ground, caught his 2 targets for 11 yards and a touchdown. So there is a world where maybe you don't start him if you have a stacked roster, if you're in a 10-team league where, you know, you just have a lot, like every team is really good and he might not make the cut, but he's still kind of a low running back 2, I would say, in this matchup. And then a receiver, I mean, I don't know if I really want to start any of these guys. If I had to start one, it would be Ladd McConkey, but he is, a borderline wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3 at this point. It's just been really bad across the board for this offense. Last week he was 1 for 12. The week before that, 4 for 39, but he got in the end zone. Bye week, and then the week before that, 3 for 13. So I mean, there's a good chance you have better options out there, like Jawan Jennings. I'd probably play Christian Watson over him just because they both have tough matchups. Watson at Denver, but Christian Watson has actually been playing well. Wan'Dale Robinson in that matchup with Washington, I'd play over Ladd. I'd still go with Justin Jefferson with the Dallas matchup. Zay Flowers, Jacoby Myers, like those type of guys. Devontae Smith, Diggs. Yeah, I'd play all those guys over Ladd McConkey. And then Quentin Johnston, I'm not looking to play him. He's also questionable as of this recording. He was healthy heading into the week, but he got added to the injury report on Friday with a groin injury. He was limited at practice, so I don't think you need to play him in this matchup with how bad he's been now dealing with an injury. And then Keenan Allen is also a guy that I'm not looking to start, outside of like super deep leagues, DFS, that's about it. And then Gadsden, it looked like he was coming on as a guy that was going to be an every week start, but he has really fallen off a cliff here. He is not someone that I want to start this week. I mean, you take a look at kind of what he's done lately. I mean, so going back in week 9, he was 5 for 68. That's good. Since then, 3 for 13, 2 for 41. Bye week, 1 for 27, 1 for 7. Now he's taking on a tough Chiefs defense, low over under. I would start a lot of guys over him, even like Dallas Goedert, Theo Johnson, both Ravens tight ends, Dalton Schultz, Juwan Johnson. Like that's kind of where we're at. So you can take a shot if you want on him, but I'm not going to. Moving on to the next game. This game should be awesome. Buffalo Bills 9-4 taking on the Patriots at 11-2. This game is in New England, and the over/under is 48.5 points. The Bills are favored by 1.5 on the road. This is going to be a very interesting game because the Patriots are the 1 seed. They have kind of had an easy schedule, which a lot of people have been discrediting their record because of that. So this will be a real test against the Bills, who have controlled this division over the last handful of years, to see, who really is the team to watch in this division. The Bills have performed well against good teams this year, and they've dropped some games against some bad teams, but I think we're going to get a special game here. This game, 30 degrees. The wind shouldn't be super bad, so no snow projected as of... I'm looking at NFL weather, by the way, so always monitor the weather after you listen to this recording because things could change. But Josh Allen, you're starting him. James Cook, you're starting him. I'm not starting any receivers if I can help it. There was a league where I was maybe going to start Khalil Shakir, but I dropped him for Brian Robinson with the news. Now it looks like CMC might be good to go, so maybe that was someone I should have kept in case I did want to start him. But he's been not super usable, doesn't have a super high ceiling each week. Like if I'm going to take a shot on a guy who has a good chance of completely busting, I want at least some ceiling outcome. His highest scoring game this year, 6 for 88 and a touchdown. Like that's a good game, but the last couple weeks he's been at 50% of snaps or lower according to what is this called, Fantasy Pros. So last week he did get in the end zone, but he was still only 2 for 16. The week before that, 1 for 5. So you could probably look elsewhere. And then if I am starting any pass catcher, it's going to be not Gabe Davis. Dalton Kincaid at tight end. If you're wondering why my dog is freaking out, it's because my girlfriend is simply living her life out there and walking around. So obviously my dog thinks it's an intruder and he's locked in. But the Patriots for tight ends on the season, they're kind of middle of the pack when it comes to schedule adjusted. They're let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. They're like the 9th best matchup, schedule adjusted on the year for tight ends. So make of that what you will. Kincaid is their best pass catching option on this offense. So he's a low tight end 1. Last week against the Bengals, only played 34% of snaps. He doesn't play a ton of snaps most weeks. He was coming off of an injury, but still 4 for 41 and a touchdown on 5 targets. So he's playable. And then for the Patriots, Drake May is a good start. Even though the Bills they got a pretty good, they have a pretty good defense in terms of quarterbacks. They are the 10th toughest schedule adjusted on the season. I'm interested to see how they've been performing lately. Let's go like last 5 games. They're more middle of the pack. Ramondre, Travion, it was awesome when Henderson was clearly the guy. Now that Ramondre is back, it's kind of been a little uglier. He hasn't seen, as much work. Against Cincinnati in week 12, he was 18 for 66, 3 for 15 through the air. I think that was the first week Ramondre came back, but then last week, Henderson was 49% of the snaps, 11 for 67, 3 for 19 through the air. So he's playable. I think I said last week. I meant, I guess, technically 2 weeks ago before their bye. But Ramondre Stevenson is someone that I probably wouldn't start at all, just because if they're splitting work, Henderson at least has the ability to rip off a big play, whereas Stevenson, that's not really his game. The Bills are a good matchup for running backs, so I think you can start Henderson if you don't have better options as like a running back 2. And then at wide receiver, Diggs, I think, is a okay play. He's been up and down all year. His usage has been kind of weird. This is a revenge game, if you remember, and early in the season, in week 5, Cooper, I thought he was rolling on the floor. I can't see him on the camera, but just rolling. Week 5, he saw 12 targets, turned into 10 for 146. The last couple of weeks before their week 14 bye, 3 for 26 and then 2 for 20 before that. Under 50% of snaps. So maybe off the bye week, maybe he'll get a little more usage here. Kayshon Boutte is back in the lineup, and I think he's a pretty good bet to score a touchdown. He's still more of a wide receiver 4 with some upside, maybe a DFS play. But like last week, 4 for 35, or excuse me, 2 weeks ago. Sorry, I keep saying last week because they had a bye last week. 4 for 35 and a touchdown. The week before that, 2 for 15. So not someone I'm looking to like force in the lineup, but in deep league, DFS, he's an option. And then Hunter Henry, I don't want to play him. He's always an okay bet to score a touchdown. He's in the tight end 2 range, I would say. I would go Kincaid over him in the same game. Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson, both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely for the Ravens against the Bengals. Dalton Schultz is probably a little safer for the Texans. But yeah, I think we can move on from that game. This game that we're going to talk about next should be awesome. Baltimore Ravens at 6-7 at the Cincinnati Bengals 4-9. Like I said earlier, this game has the second highest over-under of the week. Cooper, do you want to stay with me? You can break down the Bengals and Ravens with me. You got to head over to the YouTube if you're not. This is must-see TV. But where was I? Ravens at Bengals, 51.5 point over-under. The Ravens are favored by 2.5 on the road. Both teams need a win. I think technically the Bengals are still alive for the playoffs. If they lose, it's over. If they win, it's still probably over, but they still have a chance. It's all going to come down to who can win this division. So on the Baltimore side of things, let me pull up the depth charts here. Sorry, Cooper kind of threw me off. Well, let's not bury the lead here. T. Higgins is out for the Bengals. So let's start with their side of the ball. It's a little easier. Jamar Chase, you're starting. Chase Brown is a great start. He's really turned it on. He was a my guy coming into the year. It looked bad at first, but he's really turned it around and had a great year. So he's a high running back 2, I would say. And then Joe Burrow, I'm very happy to start him as a mid quarterback 1. With no T. Higgins, that opens up some opportunities for some other pass catchers that I'm still not super excited to start, but Yoshi Voss in the receiver room is probably the guy you want, but Tinsley has also been seeing targets. So Yeah, I'm probably not going to Yoshi Voss other than like a wide receiver 4 or 5 if I can help it, kind of touchdown dependent. But one name that's kind of interesting here is Mike Gesicki at tight end. So last week, let me pull up. No, not Jaden Higgins. Well, anyways, last week, where is it? Where is stats? Still someone I'm not probably playing, but like going back to last year, whenever T. Higgins or a top pass catcher missed time for the Bengals, Mike Gesicki would kind of step up and put up some big performances. Last week, he was six targets, 6 receptions for 86 yards and a touchdown. He does split with Noah Fant, so probably not someone I'm looking to start, but in like DFS or deep leagues, he is a name to kind of monitor. And then for the Ravens, it's pretty simple here. Lamar Jackson, he had a good game for fantasy, thankfully. Last week, it was looking pretty rough. So against the Bengals, I think you can put him back out there. 2 weeks ago against this same defense, he didn't do anything for fantasy. He had 246 yards, 17 of 32 passing, no touchdowns, 1 pick, 6 for 27 on the ground. But then the following week against Pittsburgh, 219 through the air on 19 of 35 passing, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. But he also added 7 for 43 and a touchdown on the ground. So if he's going to run the ball, I'm happy to start him. He's a kind of a mid to maybe high quarterback one. In terms of pass catchers, Zay Flowers is someone you can start. He hasn't had much of a ceiling this year, but he is still playable as a wide receiver 2 pretty much every week. And the Bengals have a bad defense. So I know a couple weeks ago he was 2 for 6 and he must have had a fumble or something. He was negative 1.4 according to Fantasy Pros. Then last week, 8 for 124 on 11 targets through the air against Pittsburgh. So I think he'll meet somewhere in the middle and be a fine play. I'm not starting Bateman or Hopkins, but the Bills are Cooper, do you want to go way over here? Sorry, he's really not helping me out here as a co-host. The Bengals are historically bad against the tight end position, so both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are in play. I think Andrews is probably a better bet for a touchdown. Isaiah Likely also has good touchdown odds, but probably a better bet for higher yardage. I'd probably lean Mark Andrews just because he is the number 1 tight end, and they just gave him a big contract. But Andrews is a low to mid tight end 1. Likely is probably a low tight end 1, high tight end 2. And Likely has had a couple weeks ago, he dropped a touchdown at the 1 yard line against the same Bengals team. And then last week, he had a touchdown called back. So he could have had 2 more touchdowns over the last 2 weeks where he would have been the talk of fantasy. And I think this is a spot in a matchup where you could start him. Like, I'm in a matchup where I have Brenton Strange, I have Darren Waller on the bench. I didn't pick up Likely. Someone else picked him up, and I kind of wish I did pick up Likely. I think he's more likely to be good for fantasy, but moving on. We got the Arizona Cardinals at 3-10, traveling to take on the Houston Texans at 8-5. The Texans look just awesome lately. Their defense is really tremendous. And I know the Cardinals with Jacoby Brissett, they've been able to move the ball, but I do think this is the week we see Jacoby Brissett finally, for the first time since he's taken over as the starter, not be a quarterback 1. Just because the Texans, they shut down everybody. Mahomes, Josh Allen, anybody. So I don't think Jacoby Brissett is going to break that trend. Maybe in garbage time he gets something going, but I would not be looking to play Jacoby as anything more than like a low to mid quarterback 2 in like a super flex 2 quarterback league. Marvin Harrison is out for this game. Also, fellow wide receiver Xavier Weaver is out. So Michael Wilson has been... Cooper, what are you doing, bro? What's wrong? He's so nervous. I think it's because there's commotion outside. But speaking of commotion, Michael Wilson has been causing a commotion in fantasy. He's been like one of the best receivers the last 4 weeks. No Marvin Harrison really helps his case. Last week with no Marv against a tough Rams defense, he was 11 for 142 and 2 touchdowns on 16 targets. I believe he was my start of the week. Yeah, he was. Even in a tough matchup, he was my start of the week. But while the Rams have a good defense, I think the Texans have a better defense. So Michael Wilson is still someone, if you have him, you're probably playing him. And I think he can still, garbage time, PPR his way to, 6, 7, 8 catches for, 60 to 80, maybe 90 yards. If he gets a touchdown, you're going to be super thrilled. A lot of it is probably going to have to come in garbage time if the Texans are leading. They are 10-point favorites, I forgot to say, and the over-under is 42.5. The Texans are 10-point favorites, that is. So I'm fine starting Wilson as a kind of like a high wide receiver 2, I would say. I'm a little more cool on him than I have been, but other than that, Trey McBride is a must start, even in a tough matchup with the Texans. Trey McBride has been too good. Wouldn't shock me if he has a down game. The Texans are the 3rd toughest matchup for tight ends, schedule adjusted the last 5 weeks, and just across the board they shut offenses down. But you don't bench Trey McBride. And then in the running back room, Trey Benson is not coming back this year. Shout out my dynasty team. So Bam Knight is the guy you want there. DeMarcado is questionable. Michael Carter is there. But even with that being said, Bam Knight is still probably a running back 3 at best in this matchup. So not super high on the Cardinals this week. And then for the Texans, I really like Woody Marks this week. He's a start of the week for me. So I'm very happy to throw him in there. CJ Stroud, you can start as like a mid quarterback 2. The Cardinals defense is kind of falling apart lately, but Woody Marks is really who I think is I think we could see a game where they don't need to throw the ball a lot. Like the defense might score in this game. I think Woody Marks is going to get a ton of opportunity, and he's a high running back 2 for me. And then Nico Collins at wide receiver. You start him pretty much every week. And against the Cardinals, that is still true. In terms of fantasy points allowed, they're the 10th toughest against wide receivers over the last 5 weeks. Against running backs, the Cardinals are the best matchup for running backs. So it seems like a thing where maybe teams are leading. They don't need to really, throw the ball, air it out. So maybe we see Nico Collins kind of maybe not be needed a lot in this game, the passing game in general, if they have a lead and Woody Marks is carrying the ball 25 plus times. But obviously you're still starting Nico. Jaden Higgins is a sort of streaming option. I would probably look elsewhere. He's flashed at times. He's more of a wide receiver 4 still this week, but you can do worse in deep leagues or DFS. And then Dalton Schultz, he's kind of had a pretty good year, been used quite a bit. Last week he was only 3 for 22 on 4 targets. The week before that, 7 for 55 on 8 targets. The week before that, only 1 for 8. So he's been okay. He's a tight end 2, like a high tight end 2 probably, I would say. Just because he's not super exciting. The Cardinals over the last 5 weeks are the 7th best matchup, it looks like, for tight ends, schedule adjusted. So you could do worse, but I would start Theo Johnson, both Ravens guys over him, Kincaid, probably Brenton Strange. Cooper, what are you doing, bro? Come here. I'm gonna have to let him out. He's nervous about the fantasy playoffs. He is. He played against Kyle Pitts, so that's why he's kind of tweaking. This game could be a bloodbath. My computer's tweaking. The Las Vegas Raiders, 2-11, traveling to take on the 8-5 Eagles in Philadelphia. No Geno Smith at quarterback, so Kenny Pickett is going to get the start. Chance for a revenge game against his former team where he was the backup last year. Ashton Genty, the talented rookie running back for the Raiders. You can start him. He's more of a running back 2. Tough matchup. They're projected to be trailing in this game. He is a pass-catching running back, so maybe it'll be fine. But the Eagles are 12.5-point favorites, so it could get ugly with the backup quarterback. I know Geno's also been playing poorly, though, so maybe Pickett is better. I don't know. It could get worse, though. It really could. But the last couple of weeks against Denver and the Chargers, Genty saw 30 and 31 rushing yards. So if there's a good chance they shut down the run, and if he's not involved as a pass catcher, it could get ugly. And then no receivers, not Trey Tucker, Besh, Lockett, Thornton. Brock Bowers is still someone that you should probably be starting. Like I'm in a guillotine league where I have Kelsey, Fannin is out there. If you did want to start McBride and Kittle, I'd probably start over Bowers. It would be nice if you could start Kyle Pitts in hindsight over him. Kelsey, I think it's close. Fannin, my start of the week, it's also close. I think both have risk, but Bowers is still arguably the most talented tight end in the league. He's one of them, if not the most. And I do worry that the game just gets away from the Raiders, and even in garbage time, like they're not able to get the ball out in time, to Bowers. But he's still someone you're probably playing. He's like a high tight end one still. I'm not saying don't play him, but I am a little nervous. And then for the Eagles, no Lane Johnson again at tackle, so that's going to hurt their offense. So that hasn't looked good. And then Jalen Carter, their defensive tackle, is out again, so that's going to affect their defense, which has still been playing well, but Carter helps a lot. Jalen Hurts was super bad last week. I believe he had negative fantasy points against the Chargers. He's still someone you're probably playing. Maybe he did. He might have salvaged it and had low positive points, but the Raiders are a much better matchup at home in Philly compared to the Chargers on the road. This is a game where they should be able to play with a lead. So maybe he doesn't air it out a ton, but if he, you really don't want Jalen Hurts playing. He's not the type of guy that, like, if they're trailing, he's going to, like, rack up a bunch of passing yards and stuff. Usually, like, I don't know. It just seems like the whole team plays better with a lead when their defense can cook and Jalen Hurts and Saquon can use their legs. And you kind of want a tush push at this point. Hurts outside of the tush push. He's been good for fantasy, but out of the last 5 weeks, you're really only truly happy in one of those games. I guess week 13 against Chicago, he was okay. Against Dallas, he had a big game. But yeah, since their bye week, he's been pretty mediocre to bad most weeks. But he's still a mid quarterback one, I would say. Saquon Barkley, you're starting him as a mid running back one. At receiver, AJ Brown is a start. He's been putting up production lately, but the team has been losing. I'd still be rolling with him as a wide receiver one play. He's at 100 yards in 3 straight games. So I don't know how you could possibly bench him. Devontae Smith, I'm a little more nervous about. He's more of a wide receiver too. He's a very talented player. The fantasy production just isn't always there because there are a lot of games where it goes to AJ Brown or Saquon Barkley or Jalen Hurts runs in touchdowns, and Devontae Smith is kind of just left with the scraps. This game also, I forgot to mention, 29 degrees, slight chance of snow showers. The wind could be a bit of a factor, 15 miles per hour. So it's getting to that range where, maybe it affects things. So monitor the news. If there are, high gusts of wind, it might be a situation where you might want to pivot from some of these guys. But if you're starting Jalen Hurts, I don't know who you would pivot to. Like in my dynasty league, I'm on bye, but I have Matthew Stafford and Jalen Hurts. I would start Stafford over Hurts against Detroit in that game environment. If you want to play Dak or Jackson Dart over Hurts, I wouldn't blame you. Once you get to like Brock Purdy, Patrick Mahomes, Trevor Lawrence, that's where it's like, okay, I'd probably for sure go Jalen Hurts in that case. So a little weather to monitor there, but nothing overly crazy. And then Dallas Goedert, he started the year hot with his kind of crazy touchdown pace. He's cooled off a little bit, so you can probably do better. He's a tight end too. If he gets in the end zone, you'll be happy. He actually was 8 for 78 on 10 targets last week, so you'll love that. That matched his season high in targets. But you can probably do better. But if you told me he had a good game, it wouldn't be like, whoa, shocking. Let's move on though. Commanders at 3-10 taking on the New York Giants at 2-11. This is what we call a mid-off at best. The Commanders just got destroyed by my Minnesota Vikings. Jaden Daniels is out for this game. I was actually at that game against the Vikings, and I saw the hit that Zach Ertz took. and it was ugly. Torn ACL, out for the year, so he's not going to be playing in this game. Deebo Samuel and Chris Rodriguez are both questionable. Deebo has an illness, Chris Rodriguez with a groin. So Chris Rodriguez is someone who I was toying with making him a start of the week. I see a lot of situations where maybe it goes wrong. Now he's dealing with an injury. I cooled on him a little bit, but I think he's still a solid play. Without Jaden Daniels, Mariota becomes once again a good streaming candidate. He's been pretty solid for fantasy, filling in for Daniels at various times this year. So, he's a high quarterback 2, maybe even a low quarterback 1 if you like him more than, Purdy or Lawrence or Goff. Even if you wanted to play him over Mahomes, I don't think that's crazy. I'd probably still lean Mahomes, but, it's not the most insane thing I've ever heard. And then Chris Rodriguez, man, I think he's a solid start, but obviously if he's banged up, the Giants are, over the last 5 weeks, they're the 7th best matchup schedule adjusted for running backs, and Chris Rodriguez has kind of taken over as the lead back for this team. Granted, he's not really used as a pass catcher. He has 2 targets on the season. So he's kind of a guy that you need to fall in the end zone. So he's probably more of a touchdown-dependent running back 3 if he's active. In terms of quarterbacks, the Giants are the 6th best matchup for quarterbacks the last 5 weeks, schedule adjusted. So, Mariota's in play. Rodriguez is a touchdown-dependent, probably running back 3. If he's out, I don't know if they're going to go with McNichols or Bill Krosky-Merritt as the true starter. I think they'll both be involved. I'd probably lean Jacory Bill, but only if Rodriguez is out. I don't know. It's pretty gross. I obviously monitor the news. If Rodriguez is out and the team comes out and says, McNichols or Bill is going to get the start, then okay, I lean whoever they say is going to start and get the most work. Chase Edmonds is also on the team. Fun fact, if you remember that name from back in the day. And then at receiver, Terry McLaurin is back. He's in play. Giants are a decent matchup against receivers. So, especially if Deebo does miss, I don't think he's going to miss the game with an illness. I'm assuming he'll be fine, but McLaurin is in play as a wide receiver 2. He's been okay since he came back after their bye week. So week 13 against Denver, 7 for 96 and a touchdown on 14 targets. And then the next week against the Vikings, they got obliterated. Didn't score a single point, I believe. 3 for 41 on 6 targets. I think it'll be somewhere in between, probably. Could have a really good game, though. I mean, he's a good player. And then Deebo Samuel, he started the year hot. He's cooled off just a little bit. He got added to the injury report. Let's see. 24 hours ago, there was an update that he just got added for the illness. So it really is something to monitor. This game is a 46.5 point over-under, so that's okay. Giants are favored by 2.5 at home. So Deebo, probably, honestly, at best a low wide receiver 2, might even just be a wide receiver 3. He hasn't really been great for fantasy, honestly, lately, outside of getting a touchdown here or there. Like, moving forward in my dynasty team, I'm probably going to start Mike Evans over Deebo moving forward. I might need to start both with, if McCaffrey misses time and I have to find another guy to, fill a spot. But and then at tight end, this is a big opportunity for Ben Sinnott. He was a pretty highly drafted rookie, and Ertz has been playing over him, and Sinnott really hasn't been doing much. Hasn't had an opportunity, but this does open up potential for him. I'm not starting him this week, but if you want to stash him, I'm cool with that. It's the same thing that happened with Trey McBride, where Ertz was playing ahead of McBride for a really long time. McBride looked like a bust, wasn't doing anything. And then Ertz gets hurt, and McBride, he's actually like the best tight end in the league. So I'm not saying Ben Sinnott is that, but we've seen this same story happen. So it is a possibility that there is fantasy value to be had there. Jackson Dart on the New York Giants is a really solid play this week. He uses his legs. The Commanders are a good matchup for quarterbacks. The 7th best, schedule adjusted over the last 5 weeks. So there's opportunity to be had there. And then for the running backs, there's also a chance for someone to have a good game here. The Commanders are the 2nd best matchup over the last 5 weeks. You got Tracy and Singletary. So starting with Tyrone Tracy, he's in play. He was dealing with a hip issue, but he's expected to play. He will play, according to the report. Last week, only 10 for 36, but the weeks before that, 20, 19, 14 carries, 4, and 2 targets. So I'm totally fine going back to him. And when I say last week, sorry, I meant week 13 before their bye. So I don't know if he left that game early or because he only played 49% of the snaps, which was his lowest since week 9. So I'm not sure if he left early or what the deal was, but I'm fine going back to him as a probably like a high running back 3. And then Singletary, you're probably going to need him to fall in the end zone, but he's still in that running back 3 range. It's a good matchup. Week 13, he was 12 for 68 and a touchdown, 3 for 34 through the air. He had 14 and 16 carries the weeks before that. Week 11 against Green Bay, 16 for 44 and 2 touchdowns. So both of these guys are in play. I'd probably lean Tyrone Tracy, but Singletary's still a running back 3. Wan'Dale Robinson is a good start this week against the Commanders secondary that just made 9 JJ McCarthy look like a stud. I don't think I said where I would rank Jackson Dart, speaking of the quarterback position, but he's a low to mid quarterback 1, I would say. Wan'Dale Robinson, he's a guy who sees a ton of targets. He doesn't always do a lot with it, but in a matchup like this, you could see him actually having a usable game for fantasy. He's had at least 8 targets in 5 straight games. A lot of those games, even week 11, he saw 9 targets, turned into 4 for 36. And then week 12, 14 targets, 9 for 156 and a touchdown. And then week 13, 8 targets, but only turned into 7 for 34. So I'm starting him as a wide receiver 2. I don't have him in any leagues, but I have him in some DraftKings lineups. Normally he's more of a cash like floor play, but I think in a matchup like this, I think there's a chance that we see him actually put up a good fantasy game. And then Darius Slayton remains a deep league option. Week 13, he had a touchdown, 2 for 41 and 1 touchdown on 3 targets. Not someone I'm forcing in the lineup, but he's a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 type of play. And then Theo Johnson at tight end. You're probably going to need a touchdown from him, but this is the type of game where he definitely could get in the end zone. The Commanders are the 2nd best schedule adjusted matchup for tight ends over the last 5 weeks. The only team that's a better matchup is the Bengals, who are like the worst of all time. So he was on the injury report, but with a toe injury, but he's off the injury report now. Week 13 before their bye, he saw 8 targets and only turned into 3 for 29. But he's had, let's see, the week before that, 3 for 77. The week before that, 3 for 36. Week before that, 7 for 75. Before that, he had some touchdowns going. So he hasn't scored in 4 games. I could see that. I could see that changing this week. He's a low tight end 1, high tight end 2, depending on if you prefer, Kincaid or Isaiah Likely. I would start Theo Johnson over Hunter Henry and Dalton Schultz and Juwan Johnson, Goddard, those type of guys. I'm debating picking Theo Johnson up and playing him over Brenton Strange in a league I'm in the playoffs in. So I just feel like Strange, if the Jags are winning and they have Jacoby and Brian Thomas and Brenton Strange is the 3rd target and ETN is running, I don't know if there's a ton of opportunity for Strange to go around, but I think Strange is a solid play at tight end for the Jags, but we'll get to him later. Let's move on to the Cleveland Browns at 3-10, traveling to Chicago to take on the 9-4 Bears. For the Browns, honestly, this is pretty simple. Shadur has been playing, pretty well, all things considered. For the Browns, I'm still not looking to start him outside of a 2-quarterback league, but it helps the offense. Judkins is obviously someone that, maybe I shouldn't say obviously, because maybe he's someone, if you have a good enough team, you don't start him every week, but he's a running back too. There is always worries that if the game script doesn't go their way and they're trailing by a lot, they're not able to hand him the ball a ton. But most weeks, he's been solid to great for fantasy. Last week wasn't great. 14 for 26 on the ground, 1 for 58 through the air on 3 targets. So, running back 2. Not used as a pass catcher a ton, which definitely hurts his floor, but Jerry Jeudy, he's had a couple good games here. I'm not looking to start him. If I had to start a receiver for the team, it would be Jeudy as like a wide receiver 4. Maybe a wide receiver. Probably a wide receiver 4, but that's it. And then Harold Fannin is my start of the week at tight end. I like him a lot as a mid to high tight end 1. And then for the Bears, Kyler Gordon at corner, injured reserve. Rome Odunze at wide receiver is questionable. So I don't really want to start any of these receivers. If Odunze does play, I don't think he's a guy that you have to start by any means. He's been very inconsistent. This is a cold weather game, by the way, about 10 degrees. It's supposed to have like a negative 10 or 20 degree wind chill, I thought I heard. And let's see, about 10 mile per hour winds. So if it's just cold, I'm not super worried. If the wind picks up, might be something to monitor. But it looks like Odunze with a foot injury is trending towards playing. I'm probably not wanting to start him as anything more than, I'm kind of looking at a list here. Probably, honestly, a wide receiver 3 at best. Like him versus like Sutton, McConkey, Addison against Dallas. I'd probably start him over those guys. Maybe Addison I'd start over Odunze, but once you get to like Christian Watson, Diggs, Juwan Jennings, I'd probably lean those guys over Odunze. DJ Moore, Luther Burden. I mean, probability-wise, I don't think they're a good bet to do well, but especially if Odunze is out, they could. The Browns are a tough defense, 7th toughest against wide receivers. Schedule adjusted over the last 5 weeks. So I'm probably not forcing any Bears in the lineup. DJ Moore is a wide receiver 4. Burden, long term, he's kind of exciting. He's a high wide receiver 4, maybe a low wide receiver 3 if you really believe in him and if Odunze is out. But last week, 4 for 67 on 6 targets with no Odunze. Tough matchup on the road against Green Bay. So, he's an exciting enough player where there's potential there. Colson Loveland, if Odunze's out, that makes me a little more confident in Loveland. But this game isn't one that I'm like super excited to find pieces of. The over-under is 38.5 points, so it's expected to be low scoring. The Bears are favored by 7.5, by the way. So Loveland is probably more of a tight end 2, like a mid tight end 2 at best this week. He's flashed, so if you want to take a shot, you can, but he's been under 30 yards each of the last 2 weeks. He did get in the end zone last week, though. So the running backs, even if the Bears are expected to be winning, honestly, I was going to say it's a tough matchup, but the Browns have actually been giving up production on the ground lately. They just let Tony Pollard finish with his best game of the season by a lot last week. He ripped off a big touchdown run. I think he had 2 touchdowns. In the last 5 weeks, the Browns are the 3rd easiest matchup schedule adjusted over the last 5 weeks. So DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai are in play. They do kind of split work. DeAndre Swift, He's been pretty good the last couple weeks. Week 13 against the Eagles, 18 for 125 and a touchdown, 2 targets, 1 catch for 13 yards. And then last week against the Packers, 13 for 63, 4 targets, caught 3 of them for 19 yards. He's been just over 50% of snaps the last couple of weeks. He's a running back 2. I'd probably lean him over Monangai just slightly. But Monangai's also been very involved. He's more in the 40s for snaps the last couple of weeks, but last week, 14 for 57, caught 1 of his 2 targets for 0 yards. And then the week before that, he's got 22 carries for 130 yards and a touchdown. Did not catch his 1 target. So before last week, he was on a 4-game touchdown streak. I could definitely see him scoring again here, but still probably falls into that running back 3 category. But yeah, if they're playing with a lead and the Browns defense, their run defense continues to struggle, could be a situation where there's some fantasy goodness for at least one of those guys. Moving on, we got the New York Jets at 3-10, traveling to take on the Jacksonville Jags at 9-4. This game has a pretty gross 41.5 point over-under, and the Jags are 13.5 point favorites. So the Jets are not expected to score a lot. Justin Fields, Tyrod Taylor out at quarterback. Still no Garrett Wilson. I'm in one of my leagues. I was going up. It's that league where I went against Kyle Pitts. My opponent has the Seahawks defense. I dropped the Jaguars defense in hopes that he would pick them up and play them over Seattle, taking on the Colts, who they just signed 44-year-old Phillip Rivers off the couch. So I could regret that decision because the Jacksonville defense is good and they're playing the Jets, who have really no weapons outside of Breece Hall and Brady Cook, if you've heard of him. He's getting a start at quarterback for the Jets. So I could regret that, but Seattle is probably the best defensive play on the week, whereas the Jets are probably just slightly worse than that, like top 5 for sure. Depends what you think about the Eagles and the Texans and the Jags. Those are probably the top 4. Seattle, Philly, Houston, Jacksonville. San Francisco is up there. The Bears are up there. So maybe I'll regret that, but I still like the Jacksonville defense, obviously. For the Jets, there's really no one I want to start. Mason Taylor is at tight end is also out, so no tight ends. Mechie, Adonai Mitchell. You can take a flyer on him if you want. I'm probably not going to do that. With Brady Cook under center. Adonai Mitchell came back to reality last week, only 1 for 24 through the air after having an 8 for 102 and 1 performance in week 13. And then I guess, I don't think there's anyone I want to start on the Jets outside of maybe Breece Hall. Mechie even. He saw 8 targets last week, but he was 4 for 34. Yeah, it's gross. Breece Hall is startable, but expected to be trailing by 13.5 against the Jacksonville defense that's looked really good most of the year. They are the 3rd toughest matchup for running backs over the last 5 weeks when you factor in schedule. And Breece Hall himself, he's a great player, but there have been plenty of disappearing acts this year. And they're not really throwing him the ball a ton. Like, he hasn't had more than, he's had 4 targets once since their bye week. Every other week since their week 9 bye, he's had 1 or 2 targets, which is weird because he's a great pass catcher. So maybe Brady Cook looks his way, but he's at best probably a low running back 2, I would say. And then for Jacksonville, tackle Walker Little is questionable with a concussion. Obviously, Travis Hunter is still out for the year. Parker Washington is questionable as of this recording. And that's actually kind of big news. I don't know what the odds of Parker Washington playing are. He's got a hip issue. He's got a chance to play. Looks like he didn't play last week, week 14. So that does open things up a little bit, kind of adds some clarity for the Jags. I think even if he suits up, Brian Thomas Jr. and Jacoby Myers are both in play at receiver. Brian Thomas Jr., probably the biggest bust in fantasy football for where you drafted him in the second round. Really has had like one good game all year. Last week, 3 for 87 on 6 targets. Like, he had a big play, so I guess he was okay. He is someone you can start as probably like a wide receiver 3, and you hope. I will say, now that I'm out of the playoffs because of him, and I could have drafted Jonathan Taylor over him out of pair with Derrick Henry. Whoops. This is about the time now where I think he could pop off just because he killed me for fantasy. So now makes sense he would go on a run to end the season. But I would prefer Jacoby Myers still. He's a good player. It wasn't working out this year for the Raiders, but their offense is so bad. Since he's come to Jacksonville, he's been really good. He scored in 3 straight games. He's taken on the Jets, who, I mean, maybe they'll be leading by enough where they don't need to air it out a ton, but he's a solid wide receiver 2 option. Why is my computer freaking out? There we go. Yeah, he's a wide receiver 2. And then Travis Etienne at running back, he was almost my start of the week. I was really close to making that call. My computer keeps freezing. That's really cool. There we go. He's a running back 1. Bayshal Tootin wasn't super involved last week, if I remember correctly. I'll double check that. But last week, 72% of snaps, 20 for 74, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Only 1 target, caught it for 8 yards. But I like his odds to score against the Jets quite a bit. Bayshal Tootin, I'm not starting him. And yeah, he only played 3% of the snaps last week, 2 for 5 on the ground. He must have fumbled. He had negative 1.5 points. So yeah, I really like Travis Etienne as a low to mid running back 1. And then Trevor Lawrence, he's been surprisingly really good for fantasy lately, so you can fire him up. He might not be needed to do a ton in this game, but the last 3 weeks, 2, 2, and 3 passing touchdowns. He's been running the ball a little bit, 16, 25, and 29 rushing yards. The week before that, he had a rushing touchdown. So he's a low quarterback 1. And then Brenton Strange, it kind of depends how you view him it depends if Jake Ferguson plays, how you view Strange versus Kincaid, Theo Johnson, the Ravens guys. But Strange is anywhere from, oh my gosh, I just sneezed talking about him. Maybe that's a bad sign. Maybe I should take him out of my lineup in the playoffs. But I was going to say, he's anywhere from a high tight end 2 to like a mid tight end 1. I would play Andrews and Kelsey over him. And they're kind of like in a tight end 5 to 7 range. I'd still probably play Tyler Warren over Strange, even with the quarterback change, but I could see that being ugly. But once you get past Warren, I think Strange is in play. Depending on Ferguson's health, Kincaid, Theo Johnson, Isaiah Likely. So yeah. We'll move on to probably my favorite game of the week. As you know, I had a couple starts of the week in this matchup, but it's the Detroit Lions 8-5 traveling to take on the LA Rams at 10-3. So where do we even start here? This game's going to be awesome. Well, let's start with the over-under. I believe it was 54.5, right? Last time I did my starts of the week, I was talking about that. My computer is so laggy right now. 54.5. The Rams they're favored by 6 at home. The Lions really need this win. I think the Rams get the dub, but Stafford is basically a must-start quarterback at this point. Doesn't offer a lot of mobility, so I'm still fine starting him. Not fine starting him. I'm still starting him pretty much no matter what. I would start him over Jalen Hurts if I wasn't on bye in Dynasty. I do have Stafford in for the hypothetical lineup. The Lions are a team you typically throw on versus run on. So Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams are both in play. Devontae is questionable with a hamstring issue, which is a little scary. He's a bit older and it's a hamstring, so you don't like that. But as long as he can, do what he does on the goal line, he should be fine. He's expected to play. Last week, only 4 for 29, no touchdowns. He had scored in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bye week, 6 straight games. 3 of those games, he scored 2 touchdowns. And then to start that streak, he had 3 touchdowns back in week 7. So I think he will get in the end zone here as long as he's healthy. And especially because I played Bucky Irving over him in that guillotine league, with me having Puka already in the lineup, with him questionable early in the week. I was like, you know what? Let's get the knowledge early in the week. I think Bucky's still a good play. So now that Bucky had a pretty bad week for, the standard of what you need to survive in a guillotine league at this point, it makes sense that Devontae Adams would have, 2 touchdowns, maybe 3. But speaking of the kind of how you can throw on them where it's tougher to run on the Lions, Kyren Williams is still in play just because, he's a threat to rush in a touchdown every week. Not used a ton in the passing game, so you're probably going to want him to fall in the end zone, but he's still a high running back 2, I would say. He has scored, since their bye week, he has scored in 5 of 6 games. So you're most likely starting him. And then, Kobe Parkinson, he's been getting in the end zone at tight end. I still wouldn't, be looking to start him. DFS, if, you want to throw him in there as a cheap punt option. He scored in 4 out of 5 games. So, it's just something to mention. Something that needs to be brought up. And then for the Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs at running back, you start him. Amon-Ra, you start him. Must starts. Jameson Williams, my start of the week. He's a low wide receiver 1, so you're probably starting him no matter what. I'd play him over Michael Wilson, probably over Jalen Waddle. Once you get to like A.J. Brown, George Pickens, that's where it's like, okay, that's tough. But if you want to start Jameson over them, I wouldn't blame you. Jared Goff is a decent start in this game environment. The Rams do have a good defense, but I think the offense is going to win out here, and we see a high-scoring game. But Goff always has a little bit of volatility to his game. He has his games where if he doesn't get the touchdowns, he's not good for fantasy. He has his occasional, major dud where he just completely collapses. And this is also a revenge game for him, by the way, against the Rams. But he's still a low quarterback 1. A guy like Mariota is probably safer. Probably doesn't have as much of a ceiling. But honestly, he might against the Giants. But, if Gibbs and Montgomery run in all the touchdowns and Goff only has 1 touchdown or he throws some picks, then maybe it's a catastrophe. But overall, he's a solid play. Speaking of Montgomery, I love Gibbs. I love Amon-Ra. I love Jameson Williams, especially with, what is their tight end's name? Okay, so I don't remember the name. Lions tight end injured. Sam Laporta. I forgot his name. Even with Sam Laporta out, that kind of consolidates targets a little bit to Amon-Ra, to Jameson, so I like that. Gibbs is in play every week. For Montgomery, the Rams have a tough defense. And yes, I do think the Lions will score points. This doesn't profile as a game where they're going to be able to pound the rock and Montgomery is going to be, getting a lot of carries and, maybe he gets a goal line carry or even 2 and he scores 2 touchdowns. In that case, you'll regret benching him. But even last week against the Cowboys, I benched him. He only had 6 carries and 1 target. But he broke off a pretty long run, and he ended up with 60 rushing yards and a touchdown, and he caught his 1 target for 13 yards. If he didn't rip off that touchdown run, it would be brutal. The week before that, he had a rushing touchdown, but he was only 8 for 32 on the ground, 2 for 16 through the air. And then the week before that, he didn't get the touchdown. He didn't score for, 3 straight weeks before that. So week 12, he was 5 for 18, 3 for 19 through the air, and then 6 for 27 and 1 for 10 through the air the week before that. So you need the touchdown. He could get it in this game environment with how high scoring it is. However, I would put him as like a running back 3. Like, I'm looking at these consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros. They have like Bam Knight ahead of him, Kenneth Gainwell, Ramondre, Charbonnet, Corum. If you wanted to play Montgomery over those guys in the chance that he gets a couple touchdowns, then, maybe. But I think Montgomery has as much downside, if not more, than any of those guys, because he hasn't had more than 8 carries in 4 games. Like, that's not a lot of work. So they are definitely phasing him out. Like, it's happening. I know a lot of people wanted it to happen like last year, and it didn't really happen, but it's actually happening where it seems like the team is kind of moving on and giving Gibbs the ball more. Moving on to the Colts, taking on the Seahawks. Colts at 8-5, Seahawks at 10-3 in Seattle. Where's the over-under here? 42.5 point over-under. The Seahawks are favored by 13.5. Daniel Jones, Achilles injury. Tore his right Achilles last week, so he's out for the year, obviously. So they signed 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, who hasn't played since, I think, 2020, off the bench. He was a semifinalist or whatever for the Hall of Fame, and now he's not going to be eligible for like 5 years or whatever because he's playing again. It's crazy. He is a grandfather. Sauce Gardner, corner that they traded for, is out as well. So as much as I want Phillip Rivers to come in here and just, put up a big game and look like vintage Phillip Rivers, I honestly don't think that's going to happen. That would be sweet, but I think this game could get ugly for the Colts. So all pass catchers for the Colts, I am fine benching. Alec Pierce isn't going to get, the same deep ball shots that he got with Danny Dimes because, 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, maybe Pierce can go up and win a 50-50 ball, but I think they're going to try to get the ball out quick, keep it close to the line of scrimmage. Michael Pittman could PPR his way to a decent game, especially if they are trailing and he gets production in garbage time, but I am totally fine if you wanted to bench Pittman. He's a wide receiver 3. Like, I'd probably play Addison over him, Brian Thomas Jr., Diggs, Sutton, Debo, unless he's, unless news comes out that he's like going to be limited with his illness or whatever, or if he doesn't play. Even in a tough matchup, I'd play Christian Watson over him, Juwan Jennings. So, yeah, it's a big hit. Tyler Warren also, it's probably going to be a big hit for him as well. There is the chance that, if they're doing a lot of dump offs, quick passes close to the line of scrimmage, that Tyler Warren is a benefactor of that. But he kind of falls from sort of a borderline must start every week to more of a low to mid tight end one. Like, I'd put Kelsey over him. I would have said Pitts over him. I'd play Fannin over him. And I'd play Andrews over Warren. Once you get to that point, I would start Warren over guys like Strange, Kincaid, Ferguson, Theo Johnson. But if Tyler Warren comes out and has a terrible game and the offense looks terrible, I wouldn't ignore it. Like, it's probably going to be bad. Jonathan Taylor, arguably the fantasy MVP this year with his ADP and how good he's been. He also gets a hit here. Like, I benched him in my guillotine league. In hindsight, I would rather take the shot on him than having played Bucky Irving, who didn't do anything in his own right. But he's a low running back 1. Derrick Henry, well, the obvious guys, McCaffrey, if he's healthy and good to go. Gibbs, Bijan, Achane. I'd play Derrick Henry over Jonathan Taylor against Cincinnati. James Cook would play over him. Saquon. I would have played Bucky Irving over him. I'd probably play Travis Etienne over Jonathan Taylor. Jacobs is a little questionable with his injury that we'll talk about. Chase Brown, Woody Marks, Javonte, that's where it's a little more dicey. I think Chase Brown and Woody Marks and Javonte and Kyron, those guys are a little safer. But Jonathan Taylor is arguably the most talented running back in the league. especially as like a pure runner. And he's got as much big playability as anyone. So he could rip off, a long run or even catch a dump off and take it to the house. It's just a bad game script, bad projected offense. The Seahawks are the second toughest matchup against running backs over the last 5 weeks. If you extend that to the course of the season, they are the 7th toughest. So it's been kind of a trend all year. So yeah, I mean, it's not a good situation, but he's talented enough where you're still probably playing him in most leagues. For the Seahawks, I think it's pretty simple like it's been all year. Like JSN at receiver, you're starting. I'm not messing with Cooper Kupp or Rashid Shaheed. AJ Barner is a tight end 2 you can take a touchdown shot on. And then Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, especially if they are leading, that does kind of, increase how much I like those guys. I'm debating like Shakir before I dropped him versus like Pollard and Montgomery and Charbonnet. So depending on the game script, I could see one of those guys getting in the end zone. The Colts, the last 5 weeks schedule adjusted, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're the 10th best matchup for running back, so that's all right. I would lean Walker. He is probably like a low running back 2, I would say. And then Charbonnet, more of a low running back 3. I could see it going well for him, but I could also see him just not doing anything. So he's kind of in that range with like Montgomery, Corum, Bam Knight, Gainwell, Ramondre. I'd probably play Charbonnet over those guys. I really probably would. Kareem Hunt is probably a better bet for a touchdown, but yeah, like him, Kareem Hunt, Singletary, Pollard, he's right in that range. And I'd probably play Monangai over those guys. And Chris Rodriguez if he's healthy. So that's kind of where I'm at with him. Yeah, that's it for that game. We're going to move on here to, let's do the Green Bay Packers. The 9-3-1 Packers going to Denver to take on the 11-2 Denver Broncos. I think the Packers are the better team. I think the Broncos are a little fraudulent, but they are 11-2, and I could see them finding a way to get it done once again. It's a 42.5 point over-under. The Packers are favored by 1.5 on the road. Weather looks fine. It says 59 degrees, partly cloudy. So the big news here is Josh Jacobs. He's been dealing with an injury all week. He's questionable to play as of this recording with a knee issue. I believe I heard it's just some swelling. So if he is out, if he plays, he's a low running back 1, probably maybe a high running back 2 if you prefer, Chase Brown or Woody Marks or Kyerman over him, just with a tough matchup and the knee issue. I wouldn't blame you. The kind of thinking was that if he's out, Emmanuel Wilson would step up and be a plug and play, probably running back 2, who he's already been in this role with Jacobs injured, and he's seen a ton of volume and done well with it. Now he is dealing with, I believe it's an illness. For some reason, it's not giving me an update here. Let me look it up. Emmanuel Wilson. Yeah, so he's on the injury report. He's also questionable now. They elevated running back Pierre Strong. So just with all the issues they have going on, it makes sense they elevated a running back. Hopefully that's not a sign that Josh Jacobs is out. Hopefully it's just a thing where because of, he has an illness. So Wilson and his illness, maybe with both things going on, maybe they just elevated a running back to be safe from the practice squad. But there's a good chance that Jacobs misses and Wilson plays through an illness. I think that's probably the most likely outcome. I dropped Wilson in a league where I have Josh Jacobs, and it's that same league I've been talking about where it's like, I don't know who to start, like between Montgomery and Charbonnet and Shakir. And I did pick up Brian Robinson in that league. So hopefully it'd be nice to have Wilson and Robinson if they were both starting. But with my luck, it'll probably be Jacobs is out. I don't have Wilson. And then I have Brian Robinson and McCaffrey is playing. But I think for the overall fantasy, we want McCaffrey to be healthy and to play in the playoffs. And I have him in a dynasty league where I need him a lot. But man, injuries suck. Anyways, for the wide receiver room for the Packers, I'm not clamoring to play any of these guys, but Christian Watson is in play. He's been so good lately. The matchup is just really brutal on the road in Denver. They have a very good defense. It could be a very low scoring game. Over under is 42.5, like I said. But Watson, he has been on fire. He scored in 3 out of 4 games. The last 2 weeks, 89-2, 80-1. Last week, he put up that 89-2 on only 4 targets, but he caught them all. So that's a little concerning. That's also the same week that Jaden Reed came back. So, Watson was kind of benefiting from being sort of the only legitimate target there outside of Romeo Dobbs. Like Matthew Golden hasn't stepped up as a rookie. Dontavian Wicks continues to, not really be the answer there. But Jaden Reed is someone interesting to monitor. I'm probably not starting him this week, but if you want to put him in a DFS lineup, if you're in like a 16-team league or whatever, his first game back, he only played 47% of the snaps, but he saw 4 targets. He caught him off for 31 yards. He also added 2 for 22 rushing. So he might PPR his way to a decent game, but he's more of a wide receiver 4. What? Oh, never mind. I got sick talking about him. I'm a Vikings fan, so it makes sense that the Packers are making me ill. Yeah, other than that, Jordan Love, he is streamable at times. I think this is a matchup where I'm probably looking elsewhere. If you're in a 2 quarterback league, he's a fine quarterback 2, but I got to play Mariota over him, Goff, Lawrence, Purdy, Mahomes. I would have played Baker over him. Once you get to Darnold and Stroud, I'd probably play those guys over Love. Still, Bo Nix on the other side, they're pretty close. Both of these defenses are good, and both quarterbacks have been pretty inconsistent for fantasy. So for the Broncos, I just mentioned Bo Nix. He's a risky start. I'm more likely to start him and the risk that comes with his upside in a better matchup than this one, just because the Packers have a really good defense, and you probably have better options. They're the 4th toughest matchup for quarterbacks the last 5 weeks, so I'm looking to probably not start him. J.K. Dobbins is obviously out for the Broncos at running back, so R.J. Harvey, he's been putting up fantasy points as the starter. Granted, he's had some inefficiencies. Packers are a tough defense, and I could see this being a bit of a defensive battle. Still, Harvey is in play as a mid-running back 2. I'm deciding between him and guys like Rico Dowdle, Jalen Warren. Now that I'm an underdog in that matchup where I went against Pitts, I'd probably go Harvey over Warren because I think Harvey probably has a little more upside even in a tough matchup. Warren has been getting a little lucky with touchdowns lately. Granted, if I bench him, he'll probably get lucky with, 2 or 3 touchdowns against Miami. But, yeah. Harvey, it's a tough matchup, but he's getting all the volume. He's the only running back there, and he's used as a pass catcher. Last week, 17 for 75 and a touchdown on the ground. 6 for 25 through the air. It was honestly more impressive. He didn't score quite as many fantasy points, but it was more impressive to me than the previous week where he scored 2 touchdowns, but he was only 13 of 35 on the ground, 3 for 27 through the air on 4 targets. So there's a pretty good chance you're playing him, especially in like a 12-team league. Like he's probably going to play. And then I don't really want to play any of these receivers. Pat Bryant is out, so that makes me a little more confident in guys like Cortland Sutton, in Troy Franklin. If I had to pick one, it would be Sutton as probably like a high wide receiver 3 over guys like Debo. Him versus Addison is a toss-up. Brian Thomas Jr., that's also a toss-up. Sutton's been better, barely, but he has been better. Yeah, and then Troy Franklin, he's not someone I'm starting. He's kind of outside of that range at this point. Last week, only 26% of snaps, 3 for 11 on 4 targets. Yeah, so... But now that Bryant is out, we could see that go back up. So it's gross. It's gross in general, even in good matchups. Now against the Packers, could definitely see the offense, not doing anything. And then Evan Ingram at tight end, I'm not playing him either. So yeah, pretty much RJ Harvey's the only one I really want to play, but even then, expectations are limited. Moving on. The 2-11 Tennessee Titans traveling to San Francisco to take on the 9-4 49ers. This game has a 44.5 point over-under. The 49ers are 11.5 point favorites. And yeah, for Tennessee, I don't think I want to start anyone. Cam Ward at quarterback, Iamaner and DK at wide receiver, Gunnar Helmet tight end. I don't want to start those guys. The only one I would maybe start is Tony Pollard. He's been disappointing all year. He had a great game last week. I'm not chasing that to make him an auto start, but he is a running back 3, I would say. Yeah, I don't think he's anything more than that. The 49ers have kind of been middle of the pack against running backs, and the 49ers are expected to be leading in this game, so if that game script comes to fruition, Pollard isn't going to be able to get 25 carries like he did last week. He was only able to do that because they were beating the Browns, and the Browns are a lot easier to win against than the 49ers. Like before that, his carries were 10, 11, 10 bye week, 10, 11, 6, 10, and then we're all the way back at week 5. He had 14, 16, 20, 18. So he hasn't really seen a workload like that since week 5. He comes out with 25 carries, rips off a long touchdown run, gets in the end zone twice against a Browns defense that's kind of falling apart a little bit. I'm not chasing it. Like, he's someone I am considering starting in a lineup, but I wish I wasn't. Like, it's him versus like Shakir and Charbonnet and guys like that. So not ideal. Like, I'd play Devin Neal, the Bears guys, Rico, Warren, Tracy over him. Rodriguez, if he's good to go. Even Monungai. So, and then for the 49ers, obviously the big news here is McCaffrey. If he is playing, you are starting him. If he is not playing, Brian Robinson gets a boost as a spot start. They brought him in because I don't think they thought Isaac Guerendo could be the true, lead back if something happened to McCaffrey. Brian Robinson would probably be the lead back. I think Guerendo would be factored in a little bit. Robinson isn't traditionally a great pass catcher and certainly not as good as McCaffrey. So it's not like you're going to get Christian McCaffrey level production out of Brian Robinson Jr., but he would be probably in this game script. Honestly, probably like a low running back 2, maybe even a high running back 3 still. I haven't really wrapped my mind around where I would slot him in. The Titans are they're a tough matchup the last 5 weeks. They're the 5th toughest against running backs, which is surprising. The Titans are. So, if Robinson does get the start, would you play him over guys like Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Jalen Warren, Rico Dowdle, Swift, Tracy, Neal? I think he's right in that range. Like, I'd play Rico over him. Breece Hall is ranked higher than those guys according to like this consensus ranking thing I'm looking at, but I think Breece Hall is probably a worse play than like Rico, and yeah, he would be somewhere in that range. But I'm hoping McCaffrey just plays. In the receiver room, it's Jawan Jennings and no one else. Pearsall is someone I'm keeping an eye on with them coming off of the bye, seeing if they get him more involved. He missed way more time than anyone thought he would with that injury. I believe it was a PCL. And since he's been back, he has done nothing for fantasy. Jawan Jennings has kind of been the guy. And even he's been touchdown dependent, but he's scored in 4 out of their last 5 games. So I'm cool running him out there as a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3, over guys like Debo and Sutton and McConkey. Even Brian Thomas Jr., I'd probably start him over him. And then George Kittle, you are obviously starting each and every week. He's probably he might be my favorite play on the week. The Titans are the 3rd best matchup against tight ends over the last 5 weeks when you factor in schedule. And McBride takes on Houston. Bowers takes on Philly. I'd probably play Kittle as my overall tight end 1 on the week. And then let's move on here before we get to the prime time games. We have the division leading 7-6 Carolina Panthers going to New Orleans to take on the 3-10 Saints. Now the Saints are no pushover team. I think they play better than their 3-10 record shows, but I still do think the Panthers probably win this game, especially with their motivations. They're only favored by 2.5. It's a gross over/under of 40.5. So they're expecting low scoring here. Alvin Kamara is out again for the Saints, so Devin Neal gets to start at running back. He's an okay start. He's been getting the workload. The Panthers, I'm trying to find kind of how they've been doing. So over the last 5 weeks, they're the 6th best matchup, schedule adjusted for running backs. It should be a low scoring game. So Devin Neal's probably like a high running back 3, but he's in play. And then Olave at receiver. I think he's pretty much someone that you just start every week, especially with Tyler Shuck actually playing pretty good football, especially when you factor in his expectations. I don't know why they started Spencer Rattler over him to start the year. But I know last week was pretty rough for Olave. He was only 3 for 30, but pretty much every game before that, he's been solid to good. He only has 5 touchdowns on the year. One of them did come against the Panthers, where he was 5 for 104 and a touchdown on 8 targets in week 10. So he's probably like a high wide receiver 2. Him versus Wandale is pretty tough. I'd probably play Jefferson over him, Justin Jefferson, but Olave is probably safer. I'd probably play him over McLaurin and Zay Flowers, Jacoby Myers, Metcalf, Devontae Smith, those type of guys. Him versus Michael Wilson is tough. I think Wilson has a little more risk, but I would say probably more upside. Juwan Johnson is a tight end 2 streamer. And then Tyler Shuck, I'm not starting him, but if you're like a super flex, he's a low quarterback 2, probably. And then for the Panthers, same thing with Bryce Young, not starting him outside of a super flex. Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard I would prefer Rico. Last time we saw this team play, Chuba was more involved than we want for Rico Dowdle managers. However, Rico did still see 18 carries for 58 yards, caught 2 targets for 21 yards. His snaps went down to like 42%. He'd been in the 60s to 80s the 4 weeks before that. So yeah, he did take a backseat to Chuba. I would still prefer Dowdle, but there is a little bit of risk there. I think they're going to go with the hot hand. And then Chuba Hubbard, he basically operated as the lead back in week 13 against the Rams. 17 for 83 on the ground, 2 for 41 and a touchdown through the air on 2 targets. So that is in the range of outcomes that, these guys kind of eat into each other's production. But Rico is still in play as probably a low to mid running back 2. And Chuba, you can take a shot on him if you want as a running back 3 in case you think he gets the hot hand again. And then a receiver, it's Ted McMillan. And that's it. Like, he's a wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 2. Not starting Leggett or Coker or Tremble. Yeah. And then we got the primetime game. My 5-8 Minnesota Vikings, Skol baby, traveling to take on the Dallas Cowboys at 6-1. JJ McCarthy, he put together a nice game last week against the Commanders, and now he gets another great matchup against the Cowboys, who all year, they've been better against the run lately, but they still give it up through the air. They're the 4th best matchup for quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks, factoring in schedule. Middle of the pack against running backs. They are the third best against receivers. So Darisaw at tackle is questionable for the Vikings, so that'll affect how much time McCarthy has in the pocket. But McCarthy himself, I'm probably not putting him in a lineup, but he's a low to mid quarterback 2 in a super flex. I'd probably play him over, if you played him over Caleb Williams or Jacoby Brissett with their tough matchups, low over unders, I wouldn't blame you. This game has a 48.5 point over under. The Cowboys are favored by 5.5, so this could be a high scoring game if McCarthy plays well. Aaron Jones is in play. Not super excited about it, but he's a high running back 3. And then Jefferson, it's been bad. I would start him as a high wide receiver 2 this week. So not a must start. And there are weeks where, maybe you want to sit him, but I think this is a game where he could get back on track. But the last 2 weeks, he's had 11 and 4 yards. Even last week when McCarthy played well, he was dealing it to the tight ends. Addison is a kind of probably a touchdown or bust type of wide receiver 3. Hasn't been good for him either. But last week, 4 for 62 on 7 targets. The week before that, he saw 10 targets, only turned into 5 for 36. But he's a talented player, and this is the type of matchup where if you want to take a shot on him, if you're desperate, he's a wide receiver 3. And then I don't really want to play Hawkinson or their true tight end one, Josh Oliver. Had 2 touchdowns last week. And then for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott is in play. I will say the Vikings do have a tough defense. So the Vikings are actually the toughest matchup for quarterbacks over the last 5 weeks. Still, I think the offense is going to put up points, especially if McCarthy can kind of force the issue. So Prescott is like a mid quarterback 1, I would say. Trayvon Diggs out. Tyler Guyton tackle out. Tight end Jake Ferguson questionable. So the Cowboys are dealing with some injuries. CeeDee Lamb is active with that concussion, so he's good to go. You're starting him. You're starting Pickens. Ferguson, if he's active, you're probably playing him as a low tight end 1. It's possible you have a better option. He's cooled off quite a bit lately since that really hot start to the year. So monitor the news and make sure he's good to go. But I'd start Andrews over him. Kelsey, Fannin. If you want to start Tyler Warren over him, I get that. Once you get to like Brenton Strange and Kincaid and Theo Johnson, that's kind of where it's like, you can kind of just play who you prefer. And then Javonte Williams at running back. He's been awesome this year. It's cooled off a little bit. Vikings have been kind of middle of the pack against running backs the last 5 weeks. But he's still like a low running back 1, high running back 2. He's been good. I mean, yeah, he's been really solid. Last week, 17 for 67 and a touchdown. So on the ground. So you'll be happier, if he gets to the end zone. That's going to like really make him a good play. But I think there's a good chance he does that. And then we'll move on to the Monday night game. That'll be the last game we talk about here. The 6-7 Dolphins traveling to take on the 7-6 Steelers. And you know what? The Dolphins are actually playing pretty well. Hi, this is me from the future for my video enjoyers. I might look a little different. I got done recording and I realized I forgot to say the spread and the total for the Dolphins and the Steelers game. So I just remembered, and here I am. The Dolphins and Steelers game has a 42.5 point over-under, and the Steelers are favored by 3. Okay, back to me from the past. I know they started the year pretty bad, but they've been kind of, putting it together here. So Devon Achane is questionable at running back for the Dolphins, but he's expected to play. I believe they said like if he needed to, he could have gone back in their last game. So there was some, Jalen Wright, Ollie Gordon waiver wire talk, but assuming Achane is good to go, you play Achane. If not, Jalen Wright, he saw a ton of work once Achane got hurt last week, which was surprising. He saw work over Ollie Gordon. So, and then for the Steelers, they got a number of questionable players right now, like defensive tackles like Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington at tight end is questionable with a concussion. TJ Watt at linebacker had a surgery for a lung issue. So he's going to miss this game, which is a huge defensive injury. He's like one of the best defenders in the league. So on the Dolphins side, Tua is not in play really outside of a super flex. He's not throwing the ball a ton, but he's playing well enough to get the ball to his guys. Devon Achane at running back, if he's active and good to go, he's a must-start running back 1. He hasn't been super involved as a pass catcher, only 2 targets the last couple weeks, 1 in week 13 and 1 in week 14. He caught the one in week 14 for 13 yards, and he's been getting it done on the ground. And, last week he got hurt and left the game early, but he was still 7 for 92 and a touchdown on the ground. The week before that, 22 for 134 and 1. So he's an auto start, but I would like to see him more involved as a pass catcher, obviously, especially as someone who needs him to pop off in the guillotine league after Bucky kind of screwed me over. Jalen Waddle is the only receiver I'm looking to start in this game. He's a low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2. He's been pretty solid since Tyreek Hill got injured. Last week, 7 targets, 5 for 50 and a touchdown. He also had a rush for 21 yards. So he's a good play. And then Darren Waller. I'm not really wanting to start Waller just yet. You can start him as a low tight end 2 and hope he gets in the end zone. I'm really excited for him next week when he plays the Bengals, though. So if you have the roster space and you can hold on to 2 tight ends and you don't have a locked-in tight end option for next week, that might be something you do. But because the Bengals give up tight end points to literally everybody. And then for the Steelers, Rodgers is only a super flex quarterback 2. He really hasn't been good for fantasy. He hasn't had more than 1 touchdown, 1, 2, 3 in 5 games. 5 games. His last 5 games, 1-0. Didn't play against Chicago. 1-1-1. Before that, 2-4-2. But and the Dolphins, in terms of matchup, whoa, I spelled that wrong. So they're the 11th toughest matchup for quarterbacks the last 5 weeks. For running backs, over the last 5 weeks, they're the toughest matchup, which was surprising to see. So I'm a little hesitant about Jalen Warren. If you have him and you don't have good options, he's in play for sure as a low running back 2. But he's been solid all year. But if you look at his workload lately, it hasn't been great. And he's gotten a little bailed out by touchdowns. It's nice that he has the ability to score those touchdowns. Last week, 8 for 13 on the ground, only 3 targets, but he caught all 3 of them for 49 yards and a touchdown. The week before that, went 2 for 9 through the air and only 10 for 35 on the ground, but he got in the end zone. And then the week before that, he was 18 for 68 and a touchdown and no targets. So it's that touchdown is kind of saving him pretty much every week. And then the week before that, no touchdown. He was 10 for 62 and 2 for 5 through the air. And you're oh, well, that wasn't great for fantasy. So, and the Dolphins they're tough. So, something to watch. I'm going to sneeze again. Maybe don't play Jalen Warren. Every time I sneeze, that means that you don't want to play that guy, right? I'm just seeing this now. I'm looking at the weather. This game is supposed to be chilly, 20 degrees. Wind shouldn't be a factor. Tua, historically, I believe I heard he doesn't play super well in the cold, so that's something to watch. And I forgot to say that Seattle game, there is a chance of rain. Temperature's fine, 60 or 50s. Wind isn't too bad, but obviously, monitor the weather. That's what I always say. So on the Steelers side of the ball, moving on with that, DK Metcalf, he finally got targeted double-digit times. Oh my gosh, it's a miracle. You actually used the guy that you paid $1 billion to sign and got rid of George Pickens for. Against receivers, they've been giving up much more points to receivers and running backs lately. So they were the toughest against running backs over the last 5 weeks, schedule adjusted. For receivers, they're the 6th easiest. So still, Metcalf is risky, but last week he saw 12 targets, turned into 7 for 148. That's all we want. Give him double-digit targets. That's his first time with double-digit targets all season. So as much as I would like to say, oh, they figured it out, they're going to do it again, there's a chance that they don't. So, he's more of a low wide receiver 2. But if you guaranteed me those targets, he'd be even better than that. I should have mentioned Kenneth Gainwell's name. He's always in play as a kind of a touchdown or bust running back 3 or 4. But last week, only 4 for 15, but he got in the end zone on the ground. And he saw 7 targets, only turned into 6 for 27. So if you're super desperate, like I have him in that same league where, I'm deciding between Charbonnet and Montgomery and Shakir, like, that's a spot where it's, okay, maybe you consider him, but you're probably not. Not starting Calvin Austin or Thielen. If Darnell Washington misses, that opens up more opportunities for Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth. Still probably not starting them, but, in DFS, if you want to take a shot on them, that's where it's kind of interesting. So those are all the matchups for week 15. Thank you all for watching and listening. I appreciate it greatly. Keep monitoring the news about McCaffrey. That's kind of the big. That's going to be the big thing on Sunday. Him and Josh Jacobs. So I know, like, a lot of these podcasts, I always say, like, oh, make sure you roster the handcuffs, and that is true, and I will echo that. Later in the year, you want to roster the handcuffs for your stars, especially the ones where there is a clear backup. But I do also understand, like, the bye weeks go all the way to week 14. Sometimes, not everyone has a super team, and you need to roster multiple, players that might actually start for you depending on the matchup. So it is tough. I know I had some teams like that. And one thing I learned this year is, like, especially in my auction league where you can kind of distribute your money and your draft capital how you choose, I went very balanced across the board. And that's the team that I keep referencing where I'm deciding between all these, like, middling but uninspiring options where it's like I almost wish I would have just spent up on at least 1 or 2 studs more than I did, and be fine leaving the draft with almost empty bench spaces, because you need that space to pick people up anyways and to roster these handcuff running backs. So that's just one thing I noticed this year, but we'll get into more draft talk after the season. So good luck to everyone except your opponents in week 15. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. As always, Cooper calmed down, so that should bode well for your matchups this week, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.